Have you ever imagined fainting in public? Not for drama, not for attention, but because your body literally can't take it anymore. And instead of help, instead of basic human compassion, hearing someone say, "Call the police to get her out of here." As if you were a problem to be removed, and not a person in crisis, desperately needing help. As if being pregnant, working to the absolute physical limit, literally starving, while trying to survive, were crimes deserving of punishment instead of circumstances deserving empathy. Maya Rodriguez knew exactly what it was like, because she lived through it, and what happened afterward changed her life completely. The breakdown happened in the middle of the lunch shift on a Tuesday. There was nothing special about that day. Just another impossible shift at Red's Diner, a busy roadside restaurant where Maya had worked as a waitress for 2 years. The place was packed, as it always was at lunchtime. Truckers stopping for a quick meal, families traveling, local workers on their hour break, a constant hum of conversations, clinking silverware, pots and pans in the kitchen, country music playing softly through the old speakers. Maya was on autopilot. 6 months pregnant, her belly already prominent enough that moving was uncomfortable, but not so big as to prevent her from working at least that's what her manager insisted. She was carrying a tray with 5 dishes, 3 greasy hamburgers with fries, 2 salads that looked more like decoration than food, glasses of ice-cold soda precariously balanced on the edges of the tray. Total weight, easily 10 kilos. Weight that a woman 6 months pregnant shouldn't be carrying, but nobody asked if she could manage. They just expected her to. Maya was walking across the hall, navigating between cramped tables, when it happened. First came dizziness. Familiar, she'd felt it before. She ignored it. She kept walking. But then her vision began to darken at the edges, as if someone were slowly turning off lights. She blinked, trying to focus, trying to force the world to become clear. But instead of getting better, it got worse. The floor began to tilt, or perhaps it was she who was tilting. Hard to tell when everything is spinning. The tray slipped from her hands. She didn't even feel it. She only heard it, that loud noise of breaking dishes, shattering glass, food hitting the floor. It echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Everyone stared. And then her legs simply gave way. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't like sitting down. It was complete collapse. Knees hitting the hard floor first, sharp pain shooting up her legs, and then her whole body slumping to the side, uncontrollable with no way to stop the fall. Her head hit the corner of the table on the way down. A dull thud, explosive pain, and then almost nothing. Consciousness hadn't completely left her. It lingered on the shore. Maya could hear voices, but they seemed distant, muffled, as if she were underwater. "Oh my God," she fell. "Someone call an ambulance." That voice sounded genuinely concerned, but it was quickly overshadowed by another. "No, don't waste money on that. Call the police to get her out of here." The manager's voice, Rick, irritated, not worried, irritated, as if Maya had collapsed on purpose to cause him inconvenience. "She's faking it so she doesn't have to work." Another voice, probably a coworker, Cindy, maybe, always jealous of any attention Maya received. "I saw her drinking water 5 minutes ago. She was fine." As if being fine 5 minutes ago meant that a meltdown now was an act. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever been so pushed to the limit that your body simply shuts down, and then had to listen to people questioning if it was real? Maya heard everything through the fog. She wanted to scream. She wanted to say, "I'm not faking it. I haven't eaten a decent meal in 3 days because I have no money after paying rent. I'm pregnant and working 12 hours a day because if I stop, I'll lose everything." But she couldn't form words. Her tongue was heavy. Her mouth wouldn't cooperate. The last thing Maya thought before everything went completely black, before her consciousness finally shut down completely, was the baby. Please God, let the baby be okay. She didn't think about herself. She didn't think about the pain in her head where she had hit it, or her scraped knees, or the humiliation of lying on the dirty restaurant floor while dozens of strangers stared. She thought about the baby, the tiny being who depended completely on her for survival, the child she already loved more than anything even before he was born, the future she was desperately trying to build even as the present was crumbling. And then everything went black. Silence, emptiness, and Maya didn't know she couldn't know while she lay unconscious on the cold floor that someone was already on their way. Someone who wasn't simply going to take her away like trash to be disposed of. Someone who was going to look at her and see not a problem, but a person. Not an inconvenience, but a human being in crisis. Someone who was going to make the choice that the manager, colleagues, and half the customers didn't make. The choice to help. Stay with me until the end, because what happened when Sheriff Ethan Cross arrived at that restaurant, when he saw Maya on the floor and heard what the manager was demanding, was the beginning of something neither of them expected. It was a defining moment. It was the kind of encounter that completely changes the trajectory of two lives. And it was a test of character, not hers, who had already proven her strength by continuing to fight every day against impossible odds, but his. The man with the badge and authority, who could choose to see Maya as a task to be completed, or as a person who deserved dignity. And the choice he made at that moment reverberated through everything that came after, through every decision, every sacrifice, every moment of connection that built something unexpected, but profoundly real, between two people whom the world had failed in different, but equally devastating ways. When Maya woke up, she didn't know how much time had passed. It could have been seconds, it could have been minutes. Everything was blurry. Blurred vision, muffled sounds, a sensation of floating and sinking at the same time. She blinked, trying to focus. She saw shapes above her, people, faces looking down. Some seemed worried, others just curious, as if she were a circus attraction that had interrupted their lunch. She tried to sit up, hands pushing against the sticky restaurant floor, trying to lift herself. But the world spun violently and she fell back. Hey, calm down. A male voice, unfamiliar, firm but not harsh. You hit your head. Don't try to get up yet. Maya tried to focus on the voice, turn her head toward it. Sharp pain shot through her temple when she moved. She groaned. And then she remembered the baby. Her hand immediately went to her belly, trying to feel, trying to check. The baby is okay. Please say it's okay. An ambulance is on its way, the voice said. They're going to check on you and the baby. But for now, just breathe. Okay, you're safe. Safe. The word felt strange. Maya didn't feel safe. She felt exposed, vulnerable, humiliated, lying on the ground in front of dozens of people, having failed at the most basic task of staying upright, of continuing to function. She heard another voice. Rick, the manager, further away but loud enough for her to hear. Look, Sheriff, I appreciate you coming, but honestly, this isn't an emergency. She just needs to get out of here. She's scaring the customers. She's causing a scene. I can't have this in my establishment, Sheriff. So the firm voice was a police officer's. Of course, because Rick hadn't called for medical help. He'd called the authorities. To deal with her problem, she fainted. The sheriff's voice replied, his tone shifting, growing colder. She's pregnant. She clearly needs medical attention, not to be removed. This is the third time this month she's caused drama, Rick argued. Last week she asked to sit down because she was dizzy. Before that, she was too tired to complete her shift. And now this. I run a business. I can't have employees who can't do the job. She's pregnant, the sheriff repeated, slowly, as if explaining the child. 6 months, it seems. Working 12-hour shifts, carrying heavy loads. You really don't see a problem there. I see an employee who doesn't fulfill her responsibilities. Maya wanted to disappear. She wanted the ground to open up and swallow her. Because Rick was right in a way, she wasn't fulfilling her responsibilities. She was failing. She was slowing down, She was causing problems. And now she was lying on the floor, proving exactly what he had always said, that she couldn't handle it, ma'am. The sheriff's voice was closer now. Maya forced her eyes to focus. She saw a man kneeling beside her, 30-something maybe. Dark hair, worried eyes, sheriff's uniform. "What's your name?" "Maya," she whispered. Hoarse voice. "Maya Rodriguez." "Maya, the ambulance will be here in a few minutes. Can you tell me what happened?" She tried to gather her thoughts. "I was working, carrying an order, and then dizziness. Everything went dark, and I fell." Simple. Factual. Omitting all the weeks of signs she had ignored because she had no choice. "When was the last time you ate?" Simple question. But Maya hesitated, because an honest answer was shameful. "Yesterday, breakfast." A lie. It had been the day before yesterday, half a sandwich that someone had left. But to admit that she was starving while pregnant, to admit that she couldn't even provide for herself, that was admitting failure at a fundamental level. The sheriff looked at her for a long moment, and Maya saw something in his eyes. Not pity, not judgment, but recognition, as if he knew she was lying and understood why. "Okay," he said gently. "We'll have you evaluated, and then we'll see what you need, okay? If any of this has ever happened to you, if you've ever worked so hard that your body shut down, if you've ever gone hungry because there was no money left after paying the bills, share in the comments. Because Maya is not alone. Thousands of people live this reality every day, and we need to talk about it." The ambulance arrived minutes later. Sirens blared, lights flashed. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher and equipment. They asked questions. They checked vital signs. Low blood pressure. Very low. "You're dehydrated. When was the last time you drank water?" Maya couldn't remember. "In your head." One of them shone a flashlight in her eyes. "You have a mild concussion. We'll need to take you to the hospital." "I can't afford a hospital," Maya said. Immediately, panic rising. Why an emergency visit? Easily $1,000 even with insurance. $1,000 she didn't have. I just need a few minutes. I'll be fine." "Ma'am, you fainted. You're pregnant. You need to be properly evaluated," the paramedic insisted, gentle but firm. "It's non-negotiable." "I'll go with you," the sheriff said. No question, statement. Maya looked at him. "Why? You don't need to. I'm not your problem. You're nobody's problem," he replied. "You're a person who needs help. And part of my job is to make sure people get the help they need." He looked at Rick, who was still standing there, arms crossed, clearly annoyed by the whole situation. "And I'll need to have a talk with you about working conditions here. But that can wait." They placed Maya on the stretcher. They fastened the belts. They began to roll her out. And as they passed the tables by customers who returned to eat, by colleagues who watched but did not help, by Rick who was already gesturing to the cook to clean up the mess, Maya felt such a strong wave of humiliation that tears began to fall. She had failed. In front of everyone. Proven that she wasn't strong enough, capable enough, period. But as they carried her to the ambulance, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked. The sheriff was beside the stretcher, walking alongside. "Hey," he said softly. "You didn't do anything wrong, understand? Your body told you that you needed to stop, and you stopped. That's not failure, it's survival." Maya wanted to believe him, but years of being told that it was her responsibility to work harder, try harder, be more, made it difficult to accept that maybe, just maybe, collapsing wasn't her fault. If this part touched you, if you felt her humiliation, her exhaustion, the weight of continuing even when your body screams for you to stop, leave a like below. Because stories like this need to be told. People need to understand what it truly means to fight for survival. In the ambulance, paramedics worked. They put the baby on an IV for hydration. They monitored the baby with a portable Doppler, strong and steady heartbeat, thank God. They checked the head wound, cleaned up the blood, and applied a bandage. And the sheriff sat in the small corner, quiet, just present. observing. And for the first time since it all began, Maya felt something beyond panic and shame. She felt curiosity. Why was he doing this? Police officers didn't do this. They didn't escort people to the hospital. They didn't care beyond their basic duty. So why was he there? As if sensing her question, he spoke. I had a sister, Julia. She died during childbirth 5 years ago. Complications that could have been avoided if she had had proper prenatal care. But she didn't. Because she couldn't afford it. Because she was alone. Because the system failed her. He paused. I won't let the system fail you too. Not if I can help it. Maya looked at him. Really looked. And she saw not a distant authority doing the work. She saw a man with his own wounds. With regret. With a determination to do things differently this time. And something inside her, something that had been closed off and protected for so long, began to open. She began to consider that perhaps she wasn't as alone as she thought. If you want to follow the rest of this story, discover how Maya survived, how she and the sheriff built something unexpected but real, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Because what comes next will show that sometimes the right person appears exactly when you need them most. The hospital was chaotic, as emergency rooms always are. But Maya was processed. Quickly, a pregnant woman who fainted gets priority. They took her to the examination room. They ran tests, blood, urine, ultrasound of the baby. And each test confirmed what doctors already suspected. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, anemia. Maya's body was cannibalizing itself to keep the baby alive. And it couldn't continue like this. Not without devastating consequences for both of them. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because to fully understand what was happening to Maya to truly feel the weight of the impossible situation she was navigating every day, you need to understand who she was before everything fell apart. Before the collapse. Before the hospital. Before becoming a statistic of a pregnant woman working in conditions that were slowly killing her. Because Maya hadn't always been like this. She hadn't always been a person living on the absolute edge between survival and catastrophe. But a series of choices, some hers, many beyond her control, had led her to this point. And the journey to get there was important. Maya Rodriguez was 24 years old, young. She should have been at the beginning of adult life, full of possibilities and promises. She should have been exploring her career, building friendships, perhaps finding true love. But instead, she was 6 months pregnant, alone, and fighting for survival in ways that no one her age should have to fight. And it hadn't been a planned pregnancy. It hadn't been a conscious decision of now is the right time to have a baby. It had been the consequence of a relationship she genuinely thought was love, but which turned out to be something much darker and more manipulative. His name was David. She had met him a year ago at the restaurant. He was a regular customer. He came every week. He always sat in her section. He always left generous tips. He always talked to her not in an intrusive or creepy way, but genuinely interested. He asked about her day. He remembered things she casually mentioned. He made her laugh when shifts were particularly difficult. And gradually, over months, his attention had turned into something more. He had asked for her number. He had invited her to dinner. He had been charming, attentive, everything she thought a good man should be. They started seeing each other regularly. Always at her place. He said he shared an apartment with a roommate who was complicated, so it was easier for her to host. Always at odd hours, he worked irregular shifts at an IT consulting firm that required frequent travel. But Maya didn't question it. Why would she? He was kind, thoughtful. He seemed to genuinely care about her. And after years of bad relationships, or no relationships at all, she was ready to believe she had finally found someone good. The hidden truth came out 6 months into the relationship in the most brutal way possible. Maya was at the supermarket when she saw him, David, with his wife, and 2 small children, a cart full of family groceries. The woman was laughing at something he said, her hand on his arm with the casual familiarity of years together. The children, a boy and a girl, probably 5 and 3, were arguing about which cereal to buy. And David was mediating, patient, clearly an experienced father who had done this 1,000 times. Maya had stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, staring through the shelves, processing what she was seeing. And then David had looked in her direction. Their eyes met, and Maya saw for just a second before he turned away quickly recognition, panic, guilt, and then he had grabbed the family and left quickly, abandoning the half-full cart. Maya had called him immediately. He didn't answer. She called again. Finally, hours later, he texted, short, cold. "Sorry. I should have told you. I can't do this anymore. Please don't contact me again." And that was it. He blocked her number. He blocked her on all social media. He simply vanished from her life as if he had never existed. As if 6 months of relationships, 6 months of her believing she had finally found something real were completely disposable. Maya was devastated, not just by the betrayal, but by the profound humiliation of having been so completely deceived, of having believed such obvious lies in retrospect. Of course, he only came to her house. Of course, the hours were strange. Of course, he never introduced her to friends or family. All the classic signs of a married man having an affair. And she had been too blind, or too desperate for connection, to see it. And then, 3 weeks after everything ended, Maya discovered she was pregnant. The positive test had been a moment of pure horror. Because she knew with absolute certainty that David wasn't going to take responsibility, that he had a family to protect, that she would be discarded along with any evidence of his involvement. She tried to contact him anyway. She created a new social media profile. She sent a message. "I'm pregnant. It's yours. We need to talk." He saw it. She knew he saw it because a read receipt appeared. But he never replied. Instead, he blocked that profile too. And then, she found out through a friend who still considered him a friend, that he had changed jobs. He had moved to another state. He had literally run away to avoid dealing with the consequences of his actions. And Maya was left completely alone, pregnant, without a partner, without support, without family to fall back on. Because family was another wound. Her mother, Carmen, had died when Maya was 16. Ovarian cancer. Late diagnosis. Rapid progression. 6 months from diagnosis to death. And in those 6 months, Maya had become a caregiver. She had left school to care for her mother. She had learned to administer medication, to deal with nausea, to clean up when her mother's body failed in humiliating ways. She had held her mother's hand when she died, just the two of them, in the small town hospital. No other visitors, because there were no others. Her father had never been around. He had left when Maya was a baby. Carmen never spoke of him. There were no photos, no contact information, just emptiness where a father figure should have been. And without siblings, without extended family, who cared enough to show up? Maya had been fundamentally alone in the world since she was 16. She had friends, sure, a few people she'd known over the years, but friendship has its limits, especially when you're asking for substantial help. Maya had told 2 close friends about her pregnancy. Both had reacted with versions of, "Wow, that's a tough situation. Let me know if you need anything." But anything was never specified. And when Maya tried to probe for real support, "Do you think I could stay with you for a few months after the baby is born? Just until I get settled?" Both had found reasons to say no. One was moving to a smaller apartment. The other had just started a new relationship and didn't want to complicate things with a baby in the house. So Maya was alone. And she did what she had always done since her mother's death. She made ends meet. She worked. She survived. She didn't prosper. She didn't have the luxury of prospering. She just survived. She had been working as a waitress at Red's Diner for 2 years. She had started there at 22, right after a series of temporary jobs that never lasted. Red's wasn't a good job, but it was stable, and it paid, and it had health insurance minimal, full of holes, but it existed, which was more than many minimum wage jobs offered. The shifts were brutal. 10 hours minimum, often 12 when they were substaffed, which was always standing all day, carrying heavy trays, swinging between tables, dealing with customers who ranged from polite to abusively rude, and tips the only way to earn decent money were completely unpredictable. Good day, she made $80, maybe $100. Bad day, 20, 15, once, $5 for the entire 12-hour shift, because business was slow and customers were stingy. With pregnancy, everything became exponentially more difficult. In the beginning, the first 3 months, morning sickness was so severe that she vomited multiple times per shift. She would run to the bathroom, empty her stomach, wipe her mouth, and return to the salon as if nothing had happened, because admitting weakness was an invitation to be fired. The second trimester was better physically, the nausea passed. But fatigue was constant, and her belly was starting to show. Clients would look. Some would comment, "You should be at home resting," as if rest were an option, as if she could simply choose not to work. And food. God, food was a constant and impossible issue. Maya earned approximately $1,200 a month when tips were average. Rent for the tiny room she rented in a shared house was $600. She left $600 for everything else. Utilities approximately $100. Transportation, she didn't have a car. She used the bus, $50 a month. Telephone $40. Prenatal vitamins that the doctor insisted were essential $30. More expensive than she expected. Co-pays for rare medical appointments, $100 each. What was left? $280 a month for food. Less than $10 a day. For a pregnant woman who needed extra nutrition, Maya did what she could. She bought rice in bulk, beans, cheap bread, eggs when they were on sale. She avoided meat because it was expensive. She avoided fresh fruit because it spoiled quickly. She ate leftovers from the restaurant when Rick was in a good mood and allowed it, which was rarely, and always with a comment about, "I can't let employees eat the profits." She regularly skipped meals. Breakfast was a luxury. Dinner was if there was anything left after a meager lunch. One decent meal a day was a victory. And she knew because the doctor had said so at the only prenatal appointment she had been able to afford, that it wasn't enough. That the baby needed more. That her body was being drained trying to sustain a pregnancy without adequate fuel. But what more could she do? Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the devastating truth about Maya's situation wasn't just that she was struggling. It was that every person and every institution that should have offered support, compassion, or at least basic humanity, chose instead to turn their backs, chose to see inconvenience instead of crisis, chose to protect their own interests instead of recognizing that a pregnant woman working to that point of literal collapse was a systemic failure, not her personal failure. And the impact of that collective failure of human decency was what was slowly killing Maya and the baby. Rick Donovan, the manager of Red's Diner, was the perfect embodiment of this flaw. A 46-year-old man who had managed restaurants for 15 years. He had seen dozens of employees come and go. He had seen people struggling, people in crisis, people needing flexibility or kindness. And he had learned over the years that showing compassion was weakness. That employees were resources to be maximized, not people to be cared for. Rick lacked compassion. He didn't see Maya as a person with a life, with struggles, with a baby growing inside her who depended on her health. He saw an employee, a body that performed tasks. And when that body began to fail to perform tasks with the speed and efficiency he demanded, he didn't see a difficult pregnancy. He saw laziness. "Maya, you need to speed up. You're losing tables." He said this in front of customers, in front of colleagues, without any consideration for the humiliation, when she had stopped for literally 10 seconds to breathe, to let the dizziness pass. He had appeared behind her. "Why are you standing there? There are orders waiting," as if 10 seconds were a crime, as if stopping to avoid fainting was a luxury she didn't deserve. "Maya, customers are complaining that you're slow." That was his favorite, throwing anonymous customer criticism at her. Sometimes it was true, sometimes he made it up, but it always worked. To make her feel inadequate, to pressure her to move faster, even when her body was screaming at her to slow down. Table 6 said they waited 15 minutes for their coffee. 15 minutes, Maya. That's unacceptable. It didn't matter that she'd been slammed with 10 tables at once. It didn't matter that she was doing her best. All that mattered was that it wasn't good enough for his impossible standard. "Maya, if you can't do the job, there are 10 people waiting to take your place." The implicit threat in every interaction. You are replaceable. You don't matter. There's a line of people desperate enough to work under the same impossible conditions. So either you endure it or you leave. Simple as that. And Maya endured it because she had no choice. Because losing her job meant losing health insurance, losing income, not being able to pay rent, ending up on the street, pregnant, alone. So she endured it. When Maya finally mustered the courage to ask for reduced working hours. "Rick, I know it's not ideal, but the doctor recommended that I work fewer hours for the past few months. Maybe 6 hours a day instead of 10, or at least a few days off a week." He had laughed, not smiled, laughed as if her request were a joke. "You're a full-time employee, Maya. The contract says full-time. You work full-time or you don't. Simple as that. No negotiation, no consideration. No recognition that pregnancy wasn't an aesthetic choice, but a medical condition that required accommodations." When she mentioned that the doctor had specifically recommended not standing for more than 6 hours at a time. "I have the doctor's note if you need to see it." Rick had shrugged with rehearsed indifference. "Then get a job sitting down. This is a restaurant. Everyone stands. I can't make exceptions. If I do for you, everyone will want special treatment." As if pregnancy were special treatment instead of a physical reality. As if reasonable accommodation were an absurd favor. Instead of a legal requirement, he was violating. Maya's co-workers weren't any better. There should have been solidarity among people working under the same difficult conditions. But instead, there was envy, resentment. Cindy, a 29-year-old waitress who had worked there for 4 years, was worse. "It must be nice to have an excuse to be slow," she said loudly enough for Maya to hear as she walked past with a tray. "Like, I'm tired too, but I don't have a belly to use as an excuse." As if pregnancy were a trick Maya was using to gain an unfair advantage. As if carrying a baby were a strategy to work less, instead of a physical reality that made the job exponentially harder. "I bet she got pregnant on purpose to get paid maternity leave." Another gem from Cindy. Spoken to another colleague, but loud enough for Maya to hear. And the devastating irony. There was no paid maternity leave. Red's Diner had fewer than 50 employees, so it wasn't covered by the Federal Family Medical Leave Act. And Rick certainly didn't offer benefits voluntarily. What was Maya going to get? Maybe 2 weeks of unpaid leave if she was lucky. After that, she was expected to return to work or lose her job. 2 weeks to give birth, to recover from the physical trauma of childbirth, to figure out how to care for a newborn, and then go back to carrying heavy trays while her body was still bleeding, still healing. The customers were the final layer of cruelty. People who came to Red's weren't rich. They were mostly truckers, workers, families, traveling on a tight budget. Many of them probably had their own struggles, but somehow that didn't translate into empathy. Instead, there was constant impatience, criticism, casual cruelty. "He took 15 minutes to bring my food." A man in his 50s, trucker shirt, tattoos on his arms. He said it as an accusation. It didn't matter that the kitchen was running late. It didn't matter that Maya was covering 6 tables at the same time. All that mattered was that he had to wait. "I'm not leaving a tip for bad service." A woman in her 30s with 2 children. She said this directly to Maya. Looking at her belly was something that seemed like contempt. If you can't do the job right, you shouldn't be working. And she left exactly $0 on the table, on a bill of $43, a tip that Maya was counting on to make up for the day's expenses. If you're so pregnant, you should be at home, not working. This comment came from an elderly man in his 70s, who ironically had probably lived in an era when wives stayed at home. He said it not out of concern, but out of irritation, as if the presence of a visibly pregnant woman serving him food was offensive, as if she were choosing to be there instead of needing to, as if staying home was an option when bills kept piling up, when rent was due, when food cost money, when survival required income. And none of those customers who judged so freely, stopped to ask, why is a woman 6 months pregnant working 12-hour shifts? Nobody questioned the system that made it necessary. Nobody offered tangible help, only judgment, only criticism about the service not being fast enough, friendly enough, perfect enough. The flaw went beyond individuals. The entire system was structured to ensure Maya had no safety net. She tried to apply for government assistance, WICI nutrition program for pregnant women and children. It seemed perfect, exactly what she needed. But the application required extensive documentation, proof of income, proof of residency, proof of pregnancy via a doctor, and the eligibility criteria were narrow. She earned a lot technically. Her income placed her marginally above the federal poverty line. It didn't matter that after rent and basic expenses, she barely had money for food. The numbers said she didn't qualify, so her application was denied. Unemployment insurance, not applicable. She was still employed. She couldn't collect unemployment while she had a job. The fact that her job was literally killing her was irrelevant to the system. She would have to quit or be fired. But if she quit voluntarily, she wouldn't qualify for unemployment. It was a perfect catch-22. Stay and die slowly, or quit and die quickly of starvation. Disability. Pregnancy didn't qualify as a disability under most legal definitions. There would have to be a specific, diagnosed, documented complication. And documentation required medical visits that she couldn't afford. So even if she had complications, which she certainly did in the form of severe malnutrition and anemia, she didn't have the paperwork to prove it. Therefore, no assistance. And there was no family to fall back on, no partner to share the burden, no community network of people willing to intervene in tangible ways. Just her, alone, navigating a system that was actively hostile to pregnant single mothers trying to survive. A system that demanded work but did not provide adequate protections for vulnerable workers. A system that penalized poverty while proclaiming to care about family, values, and sanctity of life. Maya was trying to do everything right, working, being responsible, trying to provide for herself and the baby. And yet she was failing. Not because she was lazy or incompetent or inadequate, but because the system was impossible. Because you can't work 12 hours a day on your feet while pregnant without eventually collapsing. Because you can't live on less than $10 a day of food while raising a human being without your body starting to fail. Because you can't do it all alone without breaking down. And when she finally broke down, when she collapsed in the middle of that restaurant, the immediate reaction wasn't to help. It was to be inconvenient. Call the police to get her out of here. As if she were trash. As if she weren't someone who had given 2 years of work to that establishment. As if pregnancy and collapse were moral failings instead of inevitable consequences of a system that had spectacularly failed her. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the moment Ethan Cross truly paid attention to Maya, not just casual observation but genuine recognition that something was profoundly wrong, was the kind of character-defining moment. It's easy to go through life ignoring suffering that doesn't directly affect you. It's easy to say it's not my problem and move on. But there are people who can't do that. People whose sense of justice, of basic human decency, doesn't allow them to simply look the other way when they see injustice happening right in front of them. And Ethan Cross, for better or worse, was that kind of person. Sheriff Ethan Cross hadn't planned on having lunch at Red's diner that day. Normally, when he was working on the east side of town, he went to Rosie's Cafe on Main Street, a small, familiar place where he knew the owner by name, and she always remembered he drank black coffee without sugar. But today he had just finished a call on the other side of town, a domestic dispute that had escalated but which he managed to mediate before it turned violent hand. He was hungry, and Red's was literally the only option within a 15-kilometer radius that wasn't fast food. So he stopped. He parked his patrol car in the gravel parking lot. He went inside. The place was typical of lunchtime, crowded, noisy. The smell of grease and burnt coffee hung in the air. Ethan found a seat at the counter, the only one available. He picked up a laminated menu, glanced at it without really reading. He knew what he was going to order. He always ordered the same thing at diners like this: black coffee, turkey breast sandwich, French fries if you were extra hungry. But while he waited to place his order, he observed. It was a habit. 18 years as a police officer, he started as a patrolman at 23, worked his way up to sheriff at 38, now at 41. Teach you to observe, to notice details that normal people miss, to read body language, to identify tension, fear, potential violence before escalating. It was second nature at that point. Eyes always scanning, always assessing, always looking for what was out of place. And something was out of place here. Specifically, the waitress. He noticed her immediately because it was impossible not to. Young, early 20s, he estimated. And pregnant. Visibly, obviously pregnant. Judging by the size of her belly, he'd say 6 months, maybe more. She was wearing the restaurant's standard uniform, a red t-shirt with a Red's logo, black jeans, an apron tied around her waist but not quite closing over her belly. Dark hair tied in a messy ponytail. And she was moving slowly, not lazy slowness, but the careful slowness of someone whose body is on edge and who knows that one wrong move could cause trouble. Ethan watched her carry a tirelessly 10 kilos of food and dishes from the kitchen to the corner table. He saw her pause halfway, her free hand reaching for the edge of a nearby table, holding on for stability, blinking several times as if trying to focus her vision, and then she continued, forcing herself to move, handed over the order with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and turned to the next task. Her face was too pale. Not just pale like someone who doesn't get any sun, but sickly pale. The kind of paleness that comes from not being well, from malnutrition or anemia or both. Her eyes had deep, dark circles, purple, the kind that comes from not sleeping enough, or from a body under so constant stress that recovery becomes impossible. And she was visibly exhausted, not just tired from a long shift, but exhausted at the fundamental level of someone who has no more reserves to give. And she was carrying weight that no pregnant woman should have to carry. Heavy trays, multiple plates, glasses full of liquid, precariously balanced, without help, without anyone offering, "Let me get that for you," or "You should be sitting down." Not carrying that. Just the expectation that she would continue doing her work as always. Pregnancy irrelevant. Ethan saw the manager then. A robust man in his 40s, with a permanently irritated expression. He stood near the kitchen, arms crossed, observing the dining room. And when his gaze fell on the pregnant waitress Maya, Ethan saw her name tag. When he passed by, his expression changed to something between frustration and contempt. He gestured aggressively, a speed-up motion with his hand. And he said something Ethan couldn't hear about the noise from the restaurant, but he saw the impact. Maya lowered her head, her shoulders slumped slightly, a posture of shame, of humiliation, and then she sped up, moving faster than her body clearly wanted to move, because the manager had ordered her to. Ethan felt a tightening in his chest. Anger, not explosive anger, but that cold, controlled anger that comes from seeing blatant injustice. This wasn't right. A pregnant woman being pressured to work beyond safe limits. Being publicly humiliated for not being fast enough. Being treated like a machine instead of a person. This wasn't right. And every instinct, Ethan had an instinct honed by nearly 2 decades of seeing how people treated each other at their worst, was screaming that this woman was in danger. Not immediate danger of violence, but slow, insidious danger of her body being pushed until it breaks. He watched for another 15 minutes while waiting for his order. He watched her attend to 6 tables. He watched her clear 2 tables when customers left. He watched her carry another heavy tray. And the more he watched, the more worried he became. She occasionally held her stomach. Not a sweet, protective, maternal gesture, but a gesture of pain. As if something hurt. She blinked constantly, as if trying to keep her vision focused. As if the world was blurring at the edges and she was struggling to maintain clarity. And nobody seemed to care. Not colleagues who passed by without offering help. Not the manager who only observed critically. Not the customers she served patiently, even when they were rude or impatient. When Ethan's order finally arrived, brought by a different waiter, a man in his 50s with the expression of someone who had seen everything, Ethan almost asked about her. That pregnant waitress, is she okay? Should she be working under these conditions? The words were on his tongue, ready, but he didn't say them, because it wasn't his problem. He was sheriff. His job was to enforce the law, maintain order, respond to emergencies. He wasn't a social worker. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't the savior of every person in need he encountered. And there were many people in need. If he tried to help them all, he wouldn't have the time or resources for anything else, so he didn't ask. He ate a sandwich. He drank coffee. He left a proper tip, not generous, just fair. He paid the bill, and he left. He went back to his car. He sat there for a moment before starting the engine, and he couldn't get her image out of his head. The way she held tables to stabilize them, the paleness of her face, the deep dark circles under her eyes, her obviously pregnant belly, the manager gesturing angrily, the humiliation in her posture. Ethan started the engine. He pulled out of the parking lot. He went back to patrol. He tried to focus on his work, but her image lingered, intrusive, disturbing. He'd seen worse, of course. 18 years as a police officer, you see everything. Domestic violence, child abuse, deaths, things that leave scars. But there was something about that Sina pregnant woman being pushed beyond her limit while everyone simply watched that deeply bothered him. He thought of his sister, Julia. She had died 5 years ago during childbirth. Complications, postpartum hemorrhage. It could have been prevented if she had proper prenatal care. If she had gone to all her appointments. If she had had appropriate monitoring. But Julia had been young, alone, without adequate insurance. Like many women, and she had avoided doctors because each visit cost money she didn't have, and she had paid the ultimate price for that forced decision. Ethan hadn't been there when it happened. He'd been in another city, at a training conference. He got a call from the hospital. Your sister had complications during childbirth. You need to come immediately. He'd driven 3 hours. Arrived too late. Julia had already left. And the baby, a niece he would never meet, had gone with her. And Ethan had carried guilt ever since. Guilt for not having done more. For not having pressured Julia to seek better care. For not having offered to pay for consultations if money was an issue. For having assumed she was coping when she clearly wasn't. And now, 5 years later, he was looking at another young woman, pregnant, clearly in an impossible situation. Another potential Julia. Another tragedy waiting to happen. And part of him, the part that still carried guilt for his sister, couldn't simply ignore it. Couldn't just move on as if he hadn't seen it. Because maybe, just maybe, this time he could make a difference. This time he could intervene before it was too late. But what could he do? She hadn't asked for help. She hadn't broken any laws. Technically, nothing illegal was happening. Manager mistreating employee. Unpleasant, but not a crime. Pregnant woman working long shifts. Concerning, but technically her choice. There was no legal justification for him to get involved. There was no call to answer. There was no crime to investigate. So Ethan went back to work. He tried to forget, but he couldn't. For the rest of the day, her image remained. And when his shift ended, when he went home, when he tried to sleep, he still saw her, holding a desk, blinking, carrying weight that would kill her if she continued. And he knew certainly, from years of experience seeing tragedies unfold, that if no one intervened, this story would end badly. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the event that truly connected Ethan and Maya, that transformed him from a concerned observer into an active advocate, that created a bond neither of them expected, happened exactly 2 hours after Ethan had left that restaurant. 2 hours after he had tried to convince himself it wasn't his problem. 2 hours after her image had stuck in his mind like something he couldn't forget. And when the call came, when he heard what was happening, every instinct screamed that he had to act. That this was the second chance he hadn't had with Julia, and he wasn't going to waste it. The call came over the radio. Ethan was returning from a routine check at a convenience store that had reported a suspicious teenager wandering around. It was nothing, just a boy waiting for a friend, but protocols dictated checking. He was driving back when the dispatcher's voice cut through static. Sheriff Cross, we have a situation at Red's Diner. Woman unconscious. Manager requested police presence. Ethan immediately picked up the radio. Unconscious. Did they call an ambulance? There was hesitation in the dispatcher's voice. Sarah. She'd worked in dispatch for 15 years. She knew protocols, and her tone said something was wrong. Manager specifically requested. Police, not an ambulance. Said that. Said he doesn't want to spend money on emergency medical services. Wants the woman removed from the premises. Those are his words. Removed. Ethan felt anger rising. Hot and immediate. A woman needs medical attention, not removal. What kind of person calls the police instead of an ambulance when someone faints? I know, sir, Sarah said. Her voice was heavy with her own frustration, but he was insistent. And technically, it's his private property. So, I'm going. Ethan turned off the radio. He stepped on the gas. He made an illegal U-turn in the middle of the street, and he drove to the Reds at an almost irresponsible speed. Sirens blaring. Lights flashing, because something in his gut and instinct, honed by years of responding to emergencies, told him this was serious. And he had a terrible feeling that he knew exactly who the unconscious woman was. He arrived in 5 minutes. He parked carelessly, taking up 2 spaces. He ran to the door. He pushed it open. He went in, and he saw Maya on the floor, in the same spot where he'd seen her working hours before. But now she was slumped over, her body at an awkward angle, her legs bent beneath her, her stomach, that obviously pregnant, stomach vulnerable and exposed, and there was blood. Not much, but enough to be frightening. A small cut on her forehead where she'd bumped the table on her way down, blood trickling down her temple, staining the floor. And the manager, Ethan, remembered the name from the tag, was standing there. Not kneeling beside her, not checking if she was breathing, just standing a few feet away, arms crossed, an expression of deep irritation, as if the presence of an unconscious employee in the middle of the restaurant was a personal inconvenience to him. Around them, customers looked on. Some seemed worried. Most just seemed uncomfortable, as if witnessing a medical emergency had ruined their lunch. Finally, Rick said when he saw Ethan. Irritated tone. Impatient. Can you get her out of here? She's scaring the customers. I've already lost 3 tables because of this. People don't want to eat with a body on the floor. Body. He called her a body. As if she were already dead. As if she wasn't a person. Ethan completely ignored him. He knelt beside Maya. Training taking over. He checked her pulse, first fingers on her neck, searching for the carotid artery. It was there. Weak. Weaker than it should be. but present. She was alive, breathing close. He watched her chest rise and fall. Shallow, irregular, but breathing. Good. It meant her airways were clear. He gently touched her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" His voice was firm, but not loud. He didn't want to frighten her if she could hear. Maya groaned, a low, weak sound. Eyelids trembling, trying to open, fighting against the unconsciousness that still pulled her. "Don't take me." Her voice was a whisper, confused, disoriented. "I need to work. I need, baby." Her hand instinctively went to her belly. A protective gesture even my conscious, and Ethan felt something break in his chest. She was worried about the baby, even unconscious, even hurt. Her first concern was the child she was carrying. Ethan looked at Rick. "Did you call an ambulance?" Cold tone, controlled, but anger underneath. Rick shook his head. "No, that's why I called you. To get her out, she needs a hospital. Not to be removed. She fainted. She's pregnant. Clearly needs medical attention." Rick shrugged, a gesture of indifference. "She needs to be fired. This is the third time this month she's caused a scene. Last week, she said she was dizzy and needed to sit down. Before that, she asked to leave early because she was too tired. And now this. I run a business. I can't have employees who can't do basic work." Ethan stood up, slowly, deliberately, moving to stand between Rick and Maya, protective body language, and he stared at Rick with an expression that had made far more intimidating than him back down. It was a look Ethan had perfected over years, a look that said, without words, "I've seen worse than you can imagine. I deal with criminals every day, and you just crossed a line." "She fainted," Ethan said, low voice, dangerously calm. "She's pregnant, at least 6 months along. Clearly malnourished. Anyone with eyes can see that. Working shifts that no pregnant woman should work. And you want me to remove her like she's trash to be disposed of?" Rick recoiled slightly, finally showing the first sign of discomfort. "Look, Sheriff, I understand your concern, but I have business to run. I can't have employees creating drama in the middle of call an ambulance." "Now," Ethan interrupted. Not a request, an order, a tone that allowed no argument, a tone that made it clear there was no negotiation here. Rick hesitated. He looked around as if expecting support from someone. Clients avoided his gaze. Maya's coworkers were suddenly busy with imaginary tasks. No one was going to support him. "Call an ambulance." "Now," Ethan repeated, each word punctuated. Rick finally took his phone out of his pocket. He dialed 911. He murmured a reluctant request for an ambulance. He hung up. Ethan turned his attention to Maya. He knelt down again. She was more conscious now, eyes open but confused, trying to focus. "Maya." He used her first name. He saw it on her name tag. "My name is Ethan Cross. I'm sheriff. You fainted. An ambulance is coming. You're safe now, okay?" She looked at him, processing words slowly, and then panic crossed her face. "Ambulance? No, I can't afford it. I can't. The hospital costs." Her voice growing louder, more desperate, trying to sit up. Ethan gently placed his hand on her shoulder, not forcing it, just stabilizing her. "Hey, calm down. First we make sure you and the baby are okay. Then we'll worry about the rest. Okay?" "You don't understand," Maya said. Tears were just beginning to well up. "I don't have any money. An emergency visit will cost at least $1,000. I don't even have 100. What if I lose my job because of this?" She looked at Rick, fear in her eyes. "Please, I just need a few minutes. I'll be fine, I promise. Just don't fire me, please." Rick looked at her with something close to disgust. "Maya, this is ridiculous. You clearly can't do the job. I'm going to have to seriously consider." "You're not going to consider anything until she's been evaluated by doctors," Ethan interrupted, standing up again, physically placing himself between Rick and Maya. "And after that, you and I are going to have a long conversation about working conditions here. about making pregnant employees work until they collapse, about not calling for medical help when someone faints. But that can wait. The ambulance siren could be heard in the distance now, getting louder, closer. Ethan stayed by Maya's side. He didn't leave. He didn't return to his own responsibilities. He stayed because something in him, something that went beyond professional duty, told her that she needed someone there. Someone who saw her as a person, not as a problem. And for the first time in 5 years since Julia's death, Ethan felt he was in the right position, at the right time, to make a real difference. Paramedics rushed in. Equipment, questions, vital signs. Ethan stood by while they worked. He answered questions Maya was too confused to answer herself. She's pregnant. 6 months, from what I saw. She fainted while carrying a tray, hit her head on the table. She was unconscious for at least 5 minutes before I arrived. Paramedics exchanged glances. The kind of look medical professionals share when they see something worrying. Her blood pressure is very low. She's severely dehydrated. We'll need to take her. I'll go with you, Ethan said. He didn't ask permission. He just stated it. Maya looked at him. Confusion and something like gratitude mixed together. Why you don't need? I'm not. You need someone there, Ethan said simply. And I'll make sure you get proper care. And in that moment, a bond was formed. Not romance, not yet, but connection. Mutual recognition of two people who had been failed by systems that should have protected them. Finding in each other something the world had denied. Someone who cared enough to stay. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened in the following hours at the hospital was a complete revelation of the hidden truth Maya had been concealing, not just from others, but from herself. It was the moment she could no longer pretend she was coping. It was the moment when the reality of how close she was to losing everything, including her life and the babies, became impossible to ignore. And it was the moment Ethan began to understand the true depth of the hole she had fallen into, and began to make decisions that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. At the hospital, after paramedics transferred her to the emergency department, after multiple medical professionals examined her with an urgency that frightened more than reassured, the truth finally came out. And it was worse, much worse than even Ethan had imagined. Maya was severely malnourished. Not just not eating enough, but malnourished to the point where her body was cannibalizing its own muscles to try to keep the baby alive. Dehydrated to the point that veins were collapsing, making it difficult for nurses to establish IV lines. Anemic so severely that her iron levels were in the danger zone. Her blood pressure was 80/50, dangerously low, especially for a pregnant woman. And the fetal heartbeat, although present, was showing signs of distress. The attending physician was Dr. Santos, a 50-year-old woman with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, eyes that had seen everything in 30 years of emergency medicine, an expression that was simultaneously compassionate and without nonsense. She entered the room where Maya lay in a hospital bed, connected to monitors, IV hydration running through her arm, and asked a simple question that carried enormous weight. Maya, when was the last time you ate a complete meal? And I mean really complete. Protein, vegetables, carbohydrates, a proper meal. Maya, now conscious but still weak, avoided the doctor's gaze. She looked at the ceiling, at the monitor, anywhere but into Dr. Santos' eyes. Yesterday, I think I ate something yesterday. A lie, and an obvious lie, judging by the way she said it, by her hesitation, by the way her hands gripped the hospital blanket. Dr. Santos didn't press immediately. She just wrote it down on the clipboard. She checked the monitor, and then she said, gently but firmly, Maya, I need the truth. Because the truth determines how I treat you. And the right treatment can be the difference between you and your baby surviving or not. The weight of those words landed in the room like a physical object. Maya closed her eyes. Tears began to trickle down the corners. 3 days, she whispered. A full meal was 3 days ago. half a sandwich someone left at the restaurant. Before that, I don't remember. Maybe 4, 5 days. Her voice breaking. I try. I swear, I try. But after paying rent and bills, there's not much left. And the food I can afford isn't. It's not what the baby needs. I know that. I know. Dr. Santos put her clipboard aside. She sat on the edge of the bed. Maya, look at me. Maya opened her eyes. She met the doctor's gaze. You're not in trouble with me. I'm not here to judge. But I need you to understand the gravity of the situation. Your body is failing. It's literally consuming itself trying to keep the baby alive. And it can't do that indefinitely. She paused, letting the impact of the words sink in. Sheriff, can you come with me for a moment? She gestured to Ethan, who had remained in the corner of the room, quiet, just observing. They stepped out into the hallway. The door closed behind them. Hospital sounds surrounded them, beeping monitors, distant conversations, pages on the BP system. Dr. Santos turned to Ethan. Serious expression. Sheriff Cross, I presume you have some interest in this young woman's well-being. Otherwise, you wouldn't have insisted on accompanying her. I do, Ethan confirmed. She's in critical condition, Dr. Santos said bluntly. She and the baby. If she doesn't receive adequate nutrition, hydration, rest, and rigorous prenatal care, both are at serious risk. And when I say risk, I mean there's a very real possibility of pregnancy loss, or severe complications during childbirth that could cost her life, the baby's life, or both. Ethan felt his stomach drop. He'd suspected it was bad, but hearing it in concrete medical terms, real possibility of death, suddenly made it much more real, much more urgent. What specifically does she need? Dr. Santos consulted her clipboard. Hospitalization for at least 3 days, possibly longer, for complete stabilization. We'll need to correct dehydration, anemia, nutritional deficiencies through 4 and aggressive supplementation. After discharge, she needs weekly prenatal care, not monthly, weekly. She needs daily supplements, iron, folic acid, high-quality prenatal vitamins. She needs a diet of at least 2,500 calories a day, focusing on protein and nutrient-dense foods. And she needs a dramatic reduction in physical stress. Basically, she can't continue working at that restaurant, not under the conditions you described. What if it continues? Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. Dr. Santos looked at him with a gaze that had witnessed many preventable tragedies. She dies. Maybe not immediately, but the progression is predictable. Her body will continue to fail. Her blood pressure will drop further. Her anemia will worsen. Eventually, her heart won't be able to handle the stress. Or the placenta will fail, and the baby will die in utero. Or she will go into premature labor without the physical resources to survive. Multiple bad scenarios. All preventable if we intervene now. Ethan processed it. 3 days of hospitalization. Easily $10,000, probably more. Weekly follow-up, supplements, appropriate food. And she couldn't work, meaning zero income. How did someone in her situation pay for that? Obvious answer, she didn't pay. And then she died. The system working exactly as designed, killing the poor through bureaucratic negligence. Thank you, Dr. Santos. I'll figure something out. He went back to the room. Maya was staring at the ceiling, silent tears streaming down her face, not even trying to wipe them away, just letting them fall. When she heard the door open, she turned her head slightly. She saw Ethan, and something inside her completely crumbled. I heard, she said, empty voice. Walls are thin. I heard everything. She looked at her own hands. 3 days of hospitalization. I can't afford this. I can't pay today's copay. I can't afford anything. And weekly follow-ups, supplements, appropriate food. She laughed humorlessly. I can barely afford rice and beans. And if I don't work, I lose my job, she continued. Words flowing out now. Months of accumulated stress, fear, and despair pouring out. Rick was already looking for an excuse to fire me. This will be perfect. Can't do the job. And without a job, I lose the room I rent. The landlady won't wait. She already said that if I'm late with payments, I'll be out on the street. And then what? Where will I be? Pregnant, penniless, homeless, no one. She finally looked at Ethan, desperate eyes, and the baby. God, the baby. I'm killing my own child because I'm not strong enough. Because I can't work hard enough, earn enough, be enough. What kind of mother does that? What kind of mother kills her own child before it's even born? Sobbing now, body shaking, hands on her belly. A protective gesture even while accusing herself of failing to protect. Ethan moved without thinking. He sat on the edge of the bed. He took her hands, firm, anchoring. Maya, stop, look at me. She struggled to focus through tears. You're not killing your son. The system is failing you. Society is failing you. Your employer is failing you. But you're literally doing everything you can with what you have. That's not failure. That's heroism. Under impossible circumstances. But it's not enough, Maya whispered. Clearly it's not enough, because I'm here. Because the doctor just said we could both die. Then we changed circumstances, Ethan said. And as he spoke, as he saw cautious hope ignite in her eyes, he made a decision. A decision that would cost him money he had saved, that would complicate his life enormously. That technically wasn't his responsibility, but that was absolutely the right thing to do. You have someone now. I'll help. I'll pay for hospitalization. I'll make sure you have what you need afterward, and we'll figure out the rest together. Maya looked at him as if he were speaking a foreign language. Why? You don't even know me. Why would you do this? Ethan thought of Julia, of the baby that was never born, of the regret he had carried for 5 years. Because I can. And because no one should have to go through this alone. And at that moment, transformation began. Not instantaneous, but inevitable. Two people broken by systems that failed, beginning to build something new together. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the moral dilemma Ethan faced, sitting in that hospital parking lot, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, looking at the building lights through the windshield, wasn't a simple decision between right and wrong. It was much more complicated. It was about how far his personal responsibility extended. About where the line should be drawn between helping someone in crisis and taking responsibility for that person's entire life. And about whether he was doing it for the right reasons, or if he was trying to fix a past that couldn't be fixed through someone who wasn't his sister. Ethan knew he was treading on complicated territory, dangerously complicated. He didn't know Maya. Not really. 15 minutes of observation in a restaurant, an hour at the hospital. That wasn't getting to know someone. That wasn't a basis for deciding to become deeply involved in her life. He owed her nothing. She wasn't family. She wasn't a friend. She wasn't a romantic partner. She was literally a stranger who happened to cross his path in a moment of crisis. And technically, his job was done. He had ensured she received medical care. He had called an ambulance when the manager refused. He had accompanied her to the hospital. He had stayed until he was sure she was stable. End of story. That was all his job required. All professional duty demanded. But he couldn't just walk away. He couldn't go back to normal life as if he hadn't seen what he'd seen. As if he didn't know what he knew. Dr. Santos had been clear. Without significant intervention, Maya was going to die. Baby was going to die. Not maybe, not possible, but probable, inevitable even. And the system that was supposed to take her, it wasn't going to. She didn't qualify for assistance programs because technically she earned too much. She couldn't stop working because she needed income. She couldn't continue working because work was killing her. A perfect catch-22 that resulted in death. And Ethan couldn't accept that. He couldn't just shrug and say it's not my problem and move on. He sat in the hospital parking lot for 30 minutes. The patrol car was parked in a dark corner, away from the main lights. The engine was off because he wasn't going anywhere yet. His hands were on the steering wheel even though he wasn't driving, just holding on to something solid while his mind raced through possibilities, implications, consequences of the decisions he was considering. He could afford her hospitalization. That was feasible. He had savings. He wasn't rich. Small-town sheriffs don't get rich. But he earned a decent wage, $60,000 a year, and he lived modestly. Small apartment, no expensive hobbies, no expensive vices. He saved consistently. He had approximately $40,000 in savings. An emergency fund he had built up over the years, 3 days of hospitalization, with pregnancy monitoring, IVS, medications, tests, probably $8,000, maybe $10,000 all included. Possible. It would hurt his savings, but it wouldn't devastate him. He could do it without ruining his own financial stability. But then what? The problem didn't end with hospitalization. Dr. Santos had been clear about that too. Maya needed weekly follow-up after discharge, regular prenatal appointments, easily dollars per visit with copays and deductibles, times how many weeks until the baby was born. She was 6 months along, so approximately 12 weeks, $1,200 just for appointments. Then she needed supplements, quality prenatal vitamins, iron, folic acid, maybe $100 a month, plus $300, and food. Dr. Santos had specified 2,500 calories a day, focusing on nutrient-dense nutrition, protein, fresh vegetables, fruits, whole grains, not cheap rice and beans, real food. Probably $300 a week to feed someone properly, times 12 weeks, plus $3,600. Ethan did the math in his head. Hospitalization, $10,000. Consultations, $1,200. Supplements, $300. Food, $3,600. Total, $15,100, approximately. And that assumed nothing else went wrong. No additional complications. No emergencies. Just the best-case scenario of a higher-risk pregnancy. In a severely malnourished woman, he had money. But that was more than a third of his savings. Years of savings. His safety net. And for what? For a woman he didn't know, who hadn't asked for his help, who probably wouldn't be able to pay him back. Not that he was expecting payment. But the reality was that this would be a complete donation. $15,000 he would never see again. And even if he did, that even if he paid for everything, she would still need a place to stay. Because Dr. Santos had been clear. No hard labor. No 12-hour shifts. Basically, no working at the restaurant. Which meant Maya was going to lose her job. Rick wasn't going to keep her on the payroll if she couldn't work. And without income, she couldn't pay rent. She was going to be evicted. She was going to end up homeless, pregnant, vulnerable. Exactly the kind of situation that led to the tragedies Ethan saw at work. So she needed a place to stay. And Ethan had a place. A 2-bedroom apartment. He used one. The other was officially an office, but was really glorified storage. It could easily be a guest room. She could stay there until the baby was born, until she settled down temporarily. But was that appropriate? A 41-year-old single man offering housing to a 24-year-old pregnant woman he just met. How did that look? What would people think? What did his motivations seem to be from the outside? And more importantly, what were his motivations really? Ethan forced himself to examine this honestly. Why did he want to do this? Part of it was Julia. Obviously, his sister had died in exactly this kind of situation. Young, pregnant, without resources, without proper care, and he hadn't done enough. He'd assumed she was coping. He'd offered superficial help, let me know if you need anything, but hadn't pressed when she said she was okay. He hadn't checked in. He hadn't really gotten involved. And she'd died. She and the baby. And he'd carried guilt ever since. Guilt that if he'd only paid more attention, offered more help, insisted more, maybe she'd be alive. So yes, part of it was about Julia. It was about having a second chance. About doing now what he didn't do then. About saving Maya in a way he couldn't save his sister. But was that the wrong reason? Did that invalidate the help? If he saved someone's life, but did it for selfish reasons, to alleviate his own guilt, did that make the act less valid? Ethan didn't know. Moral philosophy wasn't his specialty. He was a police officer. He dealt with the black and white of the law. Right and wrong were more complicated. And there was something else. Something Ethan didn't want to examine too closely, but that was there nonetheless. He was alone. He had been alone for a very long time. His wife Linda had died 7 years ago. Cancer. 2 years from diagnosis to death. And since then, Ethan had been floating. Work filled his time, kept him busy, but it didn't fill the void. It didn't give him purpose beyond the functional. And something about Maya, about her vulnerability, about her strength despite everything, about the way she fought even when the world was against her resonated with him, made him want to protect her, made him want to be the one who stayed when everyone else was gone. But that was dangerous. Because if he was doing this because he was lonely, because he wanted connection, because on some level he saw Maya not as a person in crisis, but as potential. What? A partner, a project, a solution to his own loneliness. Then that was deeply problematic. That was exploitation. She was vulnerable, desperate, and if he positioned himself as a savior, there was a huge power imbalance. She would feel indebted to him, that she had to be grateful, that she couldn't say no to anything he asked because he had saved her life. And that wasn't a healthy basis for any kind of relationship. That was a recipe for abuse, even if Ethan didn't intend to abuse her. So he had to be clear. He had to set boundaries. If he did this, he paid for hospitalization, provided housing, financial support. TT had to be without expectations, without strings attached, without you owe me, just human to human help. And he had to be prepared for the possibility that after everything, after the baby was born, after she settled down, she would simply leave, go on with her own life, and he would be left with $15,000 spent, and nothing to show for it, except the knowledge of having done the right thing. And that had to be enough. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened in the days and weeks following that decision in the parking lot was a gradual and profound transformation of two people who had been fundamentally alone, hesitantly and cautiously finding something resembling family. It wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't dramatic. It was built in small, accumulated moments of kindness, in shared vulnerability, in constant presence, when the world had abandoned them both in different but equally devastating ways. Ethan paid for the hospitalization, but he did it specifically to preserve Maya's dignity. He didn't show up with a check saying, "Here, I'll pay." That would have created enormous emotional debt. It would have made her feel like she was receiving charity, like a project. Instead, he worked through the hospital's financial assistance department. He spoke with the social services coordinator. He explained the situation: a pregnant woman, without resources, in a medical crisis. And he made an anonymous donation to the hospital's assistance fund, specifically designated to cover her costs. The paperwork was processed in such a way that when Maya asked about the bill, they said, "You qualify for full assistance, at no cost to you." She didn't know Ethan had paid, and he didn't tell her. He showed up for a visit the next day. He knocked on the door of the room. He went in when he heard a faint "Come in, just checking on you," he said casually, as if it were normal for sheriff to visit a hospital patient who wasn't family. Maya was better, visibly better. Just 24 hours of full hydration, proper nutrition, and real rest had made a dramatic difference. Color was returning to her face. Dark circles were still there, but less pronounced. Her eyes were more focused. She was sitting on the bed, watching TV without really watching, and turned when he came in. "Sheriff Cross," she said. "Surprised you. Didn't expect to see you again." As if she thought his rescue had been a one-off act. That after making sure she got to the hospital, he would simply disappear back into his life. "Ethan," he corrected. "You can call me Ethan." And of course, I came back. "I wanted to make sure you're recovering well." He pulled up a chair. He sat down, not too close, respecting personal space. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Maya admitted. "Much better. The four and real food. It makes a difference." She paused. "I can't thank you enough. You saved my life. The babies. And I don't even know why. Why are you doing this?" she asked directly, looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion, and the cautious suspicion of someone who had learned that kindness always came at a price. Ethan considered how to respond. He could tell her about Julia, about guilt, but that would put an emotional burden on her. It would make her feel like she was a substitute for his sister. So he kept it simple, because someone needs it, and because I can. Sometimes it's that simple. An answer that was true, but not entirely true. Maya looked at him for a long moment, assessing, searching for hidden motives. But apparently she found nothing frightening because she relaxed slightly. "Thank you again. I don't know how I'm going to repay you, but you don't have to repay me," Ethan interrupted gently. "Seriously, it's not a loan. It's just help." He started showing up daily, always. In the middle of the afternoon, after his main shift, but before nighttime emergencies began. Sometimes he'd stay for 15 minutes, sometimes an hour. It depended on how much Maya wanted to talk, how tired she was, and he always brought something small. On the second day, he brought a book. "You mentioned you were bored. I thought maybe it was romance. Nothing heavy. Just light escapism." Maya held it like a treasure. "I love to read. I haven't done it in so long because, well, tiredness. And I couldn't afford books. The library is free," Ethan pointed out. "I know, but it required energy to go there and carry books back." And she stopped, because she was admitting that even the simple task of going to the library had been too much. "Thank you," she said quietly. On the third day, she brought fresh fruit. Apples, grapes, strawberries. Hospital food is technically nutritious, but it's not exactly good. Maya looked at the bag with something close to reverence. Fresh fruit. God, it's been so long. She picked up a strawberry, ate slowly, savoring, eyes closing with genuine pleasure at real, fresh, sweet food. "This is better than anything I've eaten in months." It wasn't hyperbole. It was literal truth. On the fourth day, he simply showed up, without bringing anything. Just being present. He sat in the chair, and for the first time, they really talked. Not just a superficial "how are you" check-in, but a real conversation. Maya, with her barriers beginning to crumble, told her story. About David, about the relationship she thought was love, about discovering he was married, about being discarded, about discovering her pregnancy on her own. "I was so stupid," she said, deep shame in her voice. "All the signs were there. He only came to my house. Strange hours. He never introduced me to anyone. How could I not have noticed?" "You were human," Ethan said firmly. "You wanted to believe that someone cared about you, that you had found a real connection. There's nothing stupid about that." He lied. He manipulated. He used you. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes him a complete jerk. The direct way he said it, without judgment, without pity, just a statement of fact, made something inside Maya Lucine, and she laughed. Her first real, genuine laugh in months, maybe a year. A sound that surprised even herself. "Complete jerk," she repeated. "Yes, he is." Ethan also shared. Not all the details immediately, but little by little, over the course of days, he told her about Julia, about his younger sister, whom he had essentially raised after their parents died in a car accident when he was 19 and she was 15. About how he had tried to be a father and a brother at the same time. About how she had grown up, moved away, become pregnant. About how he hadn't realized she was struggling until it was too late. About the guilt he carried. If I had only paid more attention, if I had offered more help, maybe she would be Alive? So that's it? Maya asked. Not aggressively, not angrily, but needing to know the truth. I'm a charity project because you feel guilty. I'm a replacement for the sister you lost. It was a fair question, and Ethan honored it with honesty. Part of it is about Julia. I'm not going to lie. But no, you're not a replacement. You're a person. A person who deserves help, who deserves to live, who deserves to have a healthy baby. And I have the resources to help. Simple as that. Nothing is. That's simple, Maya said quietly. There are always complications. There are always expectations. Not this time, Ethan promised. Not with me. When Maya was discharged on the fourth day, Dr. Santos, pleased with her progress but firm in her instructions for rigorous follow-up, Ethan was there. And he had a plan he'd rehearsed 1,000 times in his head, trying to find the right words that wouldn't sound inappropriate or frightening. Maya, I know you have nowhere to go. I know your job at the restaurant is probably over. And I know you can't pay rent without income. She shrank, because it was all true. I have a 2-bedroom apartment. I use one. The other is technically an office, but is really a storage room. It could be a guest room. You can stay there, temporarily, until you get settled. The baby is born. You figure out your next steps. Maya looked at him as if she had grown a second head. You, what? You're offering me a place to stay, to someone you've known for 4 days. Yes, simple, straightforward. I can't accept this, Maya said automatically. Why? Because you don't know me. Because it's strange. A single man offering a place to stay to a pregnant woman. How does that look? It looks like someone needs help, and someone has the resources to give it, Ethan said. Look, I understand reservations, but consider an alternative. You go back to the room you rent, assuming it's still available, that the landlady hasn't evicted you. You have no income. You can't pay rent next month. Then you get evicted, pregnant, homeless. And then what? Shelter, the street. He paused. Or you accept a safe room, adequate food, no expectations, no pressure, just space to recover and give birth to the baby safely. Maya wanted to argue, but she had no argument, because he was right. The alternative was catastrophe. Why would you do that? She asked again. Because it still didn't make sense. Because I can. And because nobody should have to go through this alone. He looked into her eyes. You can say no. No judgment. No pressure. I'll help you find another place if you prefer. But the offer is there. Maya was silent for a long moment, weighing options, assessing risks. And then, because she had no real choice, and because something inside her had instinct that rarely misled her told her that this man was genuine, she nodded. Okay. Temporarily. Until I figure something out. Temporarily, Ethan agreed, knowing that neither of them truly believed it. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because Maya's journey living in Ethan's apartment, from a stranger in crisis to an integral part of his life, was a slow and delicate process of transformation that neither of them expected. It was filled with uncomfortable moments, boundaries being tested and established, and mutual vulnerability that gradually built a foundation of trust so solid that when deeper feelings eventually emerged, they were based on something real, something built through consistent actions, not empty words. And that was the difference that made it all possible. Maya stayed in Ethan's guest room. At first, it was strange, deeply strange. She moved in with literally nothing but the clothes she was wearing, and a small bag of belongings that Ethan had retrieved from her former room, because the landlady had already begun eviction proceedings when she learned that Maya was in the hospital and couldn't pay rent. Ethan paid what she owed, took her things, and brought everything to his apartment. It wasn't much: clothes, a few books, a framed photo of her mother, nothing else. Her entire life fit into 2 bags. The room Ethan offered was small but functional. A single bed he'd hastily bought because his previous office only had a desk and chair, a dresser, clean curtains. Nothing special, but infinitely better than the alternative. Maya sat on the bed that first night, alone in the room, door closed, and tried to process how her life had changed so drastically in less than a week. From working brutal shifts at a restaurant to living with a sheriff she barely knew, it was surreal and terrifying, and she expected something: judgment, insinuations, unspoken expectations that if she was living there for free, she would eventually have to pay somehow, because it was always like that. Nothing was truly free. But Ethan was just kind, consistently, inexplicably kind. No apparent ulterior motives, respectful of her space in ways that made it clear he understood how vulnerable she was. He knocked before entering any room where she was. He never entered her bedroom without explicit permission. He maintained an appropriate physical distance. There were no inappropriate touches, no lingering stares, no comments about her body or pregnancy that made her uncomfortable. He was just safe, and Maya wasn't used to being safe. Ethan woke up early, 5:30 every morning. He made coffee, he prepared breakfast, and he always made enough for two: scrambled eggs, toast, fruit, and he left a covered plate on the table for Maya with a simple note: "Breakfast is ready. Eat when you wake up." A small gesture that meant everything, because she didn't have to ask. She didn't have to feel guilty about eating his food. It was just there, offered freely. He checked if she had eaten, not in an invasive way, but casually. "Did you like breakfast? Did you have lunch?" "I left sandwich ingredients in the fridge. I'll make dinner when I get back." Any preferences? Always offering choices, never taking control. And when Maya tried to help: "I can cook. I should be cooking. You're working all day and I'm just..." He shook his head. "You're recovering. You're growing as a human being. That's enough work. Let me take care of the rest for now." He would take her to her prenatal appointments. Every week, as prescribed by Dr. Santos, he would drive her to the clinic, would wait in the waiting room. He wouldn't try to enter the appointments unless she asked, respecting her privacy. Then, on the way back, he would ask, "How did it go? Everything all right with you and the baby?" And he would truly listen when she answered, not just politely, but genuinely interested, without expecting anything in return. And little by little, over days that turned into weeks, Maya began to relax. She began to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, this man really didn't want anything more than to help. And something grew between them. It wasn't instant. It wasn't the explosive passion of a movie romance. It was gradual, built in layers of long conversations at night. Ethan would come home from work. They would have dinner together. And then, instead of retiring to separate rooms, they would stay in the living room talking about everything, about nothing. Maya would talk about her mother, about how she had been a caregiver at such a young age, about how she had learned to administer pain medication, to clean up when her body failed, to hold the hand of someone dying. "I was 16. It shouldn't have been my responsibility, but it was. And I did it, because she was my mother and I loved her." Ethan was talking about Linda, his wife, who had died 7 years ago, about 2 years of cancer, treatments, hope, relapses, the inevitable end. I watched her wither away, from a strong, independent woman to someone who couldn't get out of bed on her own. And at the end, when she died, part of me felt relief, and then guilt for feeling relief. How do you forgive yourself for being relieved that someone you love has died? "You recognize that you didn't want her to die," Maya said gently. "You wanted her suffering to end. There's a difference." They laughed about silly things, bad TV shows, absurd news stories, embarrassing childhood memories. Maya talked about the time she tried to make pancakes at age 8 and almost set the kitchen on fire. Ethan talked about the time he decided he wanted to be a detective at age 10 and spent weeks investigating neighbors until his mother had to explain that no, observing people through windows with binoculars wasn't appropriate, and they laughed. Genuine laughter that filled an apartment that had been very quiet for a long time. And there were moments, small moments, that gradually built emotional intimacy. One night, Maya was struggling to sleep because the baby was especially active, kicking constantly. She left the room at 2 in the morning, found Ethan still awake in the living room, working on paperwork. "Baby's doing gymnastics," she said, hand on her belly. Ethan looked at her. "May I?" Hesitant gesture toward her belly. Asking permission. Maya nodded. He placed his hand on her belly, gentle, respectful, and then he felt it. A strong kick against his palm, an expression of pure wonder on her face. "This is incredible. There's a real person in there." Maya laughed. "A real person who won't let me sleep? That's less incredible at 2 in the morning." But she was smiling, and she didn't move his hand. Weeks turned into months, and then 2 months, and Maya's transformation was dramatic. She was thriving in ways she didn't even know were possible, gaining healthy weight, not just a growing belly, but her whole body filling out healthily. Her face was no longer pale and hollow, but full of color, full of life. Her hair was brighter, her eyes were clearer, her energy was gradually returning, and the baby was strong and active. Each prenatal appointment brought good news. Strong heartbeat, perfect growth. "You've turned completely," Dr. Santos would say, impressed. "Whatever you're doing, keep going." Ethan realized, at some point he couldn't pinpoint exactly, that he had fallen in love. It wasn't about the baby all, though he cared deeply about babies too, felt a connection to the little being yet unborn. But it was about Maya, about her strength, which became more apparent the more she recovered, about the way she faced each day with determination even after everything she had been through, about her laughter, about the way she thought deeply about things, about her kindness, despite the world having been cruel, and about her vulnerability, about how she was slowly learning to trust again. He was in love, and he didn't know what to do with it. One night, 3 months after Maya had moved in, they were sitting on the couch, watching a movie neither of them was really paying attention to, and Maya suddenly took his hand. A simple gesture, but full of meaning. "Ethan," soft voice, serious. He looked at her. "Thank you for everything. You saved our lives, mine and the baby's, and not just physically. You gave me hope again, made me believe that there are good people, that not everything is transactional, that real kindness exists." She paused. "And I'm feeling things for you. And I don't know if it's just gratitude because you saved me, or if it's more." Ethan squeezed her hand. His heart raced. "I feel it too," he admitted, "and I don't fully know what it is either. But I know that when you're not here, the house feels empty. I know that the best part of my day is when I get home and you're here. I know that when I think about the future, you're in it, you and baby. And that scares me because I don't want you to feel pressure. I don't want you to confuse gratitude with something else, if it isn't. It's not just gratitude," Maya said, looking into his eyes. "I'm sure of that, because when I think of you, I don't think about what you've done for me. I think about who you are, how you laugh, how you care, how you make coffee every morning even when you're tired, how you listen when I talk, how you make me feel safe in a way I've never felt before." Ethan raised his free hand. He touched her face gently. "Then we'll figure it out together. No rush. We have time." And he leaned in, slowly, giving her a chance to pull back if she wanted. But she didn't pull back. She met him midway, and when they kissed, it was gentle, tentative, like a whispered promise of something new beginning, something built on a solid foundation of trust and mutual respect. And when they parted, both had tears in their eyes. But they were good tears, of relief, of hope, of recognizing that perhaps, just perhaps, something beautiful could grow from the ruins of so much pain. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the 2 months following that first kiss were a period of healing and transformation that seemed almost magical compared to the hell Maya had lived through before. Life had stabilized in ways she never imagined possible. She was healthy. Baby was healthy. And for the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She was building a future. She was allowing herself to dream of possibilities instead of just fearing catastrophes. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the envelope arrived, and the world she had so carefully built threatened to crumble again. Maya was entering her last month of pregnancy. 36 weeks, huge belly, active and strong baby. Weekly prenatal appointments showed everything was perfect. "You're ready," Dr. Santos had said at the last appointment. "Baby is in position. Weight is good. Vital signs are perfect. Any day now, in the next few weeks." And for the first time, Maya didn't feel panic about the approaching birth. She felt anticipation, because she wasn't alone anymore. She had Ethan. She had stability. She had a plan. Ethan had proposed 3 weeks ago. It wasn't a big production. No expensive ring or fancy restaurant. It was a quiet night at home. They were in the kitchen, preparing dinner together, a routine they had developed. Ethan cooked protein. Maya made salad, working side by side in comfortable silence. And suddenly, he stopped. He turned to her. "Maya," serious tone. She looked at him. "I know it's early. I know you're pregnant with someone else's child. I know this is complicated. But I love you. I love who you are, and I want to be in your life, in this baby's life, officially, permanently." He took a deep breath. "Marry me. Not now. After the baby is born, when you're sure. But, marry me." Maya had been paralyzed for a moment, processing, and then tears began. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder. "Yes, I'll marry you." There was no ring. Ethan hadn't bought one because he didn't want to presume, but the promise was real, solid, and Maya felt for the first time since her mother's death that she had a family again. Not a blood family, but a chosen family, which was better. They had decided to marry after the baby was born, to give Maya time to recover from childbirth, to establish a routine with a newborn, without rushing. Just the certainty that they were committed to each other. And Maya had begun to think about a real future. Not just how am I going to survive today, but what do I want to do with my life? She had talked about eventually going back to school, maybe nursing. "I took care of my mother," she told Ethan, "and it was awful. But I also discovered that I was good at it, that I liked helping, and nurses make a real difference." Ethan had encouraged her. "After the baby is older, when you're ready, I fully support you." Possibilities, hope, a future that seemed bright instead of terrifying. But one Tuesday morning, Maya would later think with bitter irony, the mail arrived. Ethan had left for work early. Maya was alone, wearing comfortable pajamas, drinking tea in the kitchen while watching the morning news. She heard the sound of a mail truck. She got up with difficulty. Moving around at 36 weeks pregnant was a challenge and went to the door. There was an envelope. Registered mail, requiring a signature. Maya signed, picked up the envelope, went back inside, looked at the sender. Law firm. A name she didn't recognize. In a different state. Her heart began to race with unspecified anxiety. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers, pulled out documents, and began to read. The first words made the world stop. Petition for establishment of paternity and custody. Maya read more, each line worse than the last. Petitioner David Michael Harrison seeks to establish legal paternity of an unborn minor, expected to be born approximately date. Petitioner claims to be the biological father based on a relationship with respondent Maya Rodriguez. Petitioner requests a compulsory DNA test after birth. Petitioner seeks primary physical and legal custody based on evidence that the mother is unfit for responsible parenting. Maya felt nausea rising. David. It was David, the man who had used her, who had lied to her. who had disappeared the moment he found out about the pregnancy, who had blocked her, who had moved to another city to avoid responsibility. And now, 9 months later, he was coming back, not to support her, not to co-parent, but to take her baby, to claim primary custody. She continued reading, her hands trembling so violently that the paper rattled. Evidence of maternal inadequacy includes history of severe financial instability, recent psychiatric hospitalization demonstrating inability to care for herself, lack of permanent residence, currently residing with a man she only recently met, lack of stable employment, lack of a family support network, psychiatric hospitalization. Maya felt confused through the panic. She had never, and then she understood. Hospital. The 3-day hospitalization when she had collapsed. They were distorting it, calling it psychiatric hospitalization, as if she had been hospitalized for mental instability, instead of malnutrition caused by poverty. They were taking her most vulnerable moment, the moment when she almost died because she was working herself to the point of collapse, trying to survive on using it as a weapon against her. Attachments to the document included evidence, medical records. How on earth did he get that? Showing hospitalizations, showing diagnoses of severe malnutrition, anemia, critical dehydration, but presented without context, without explanation of why. Just clinical numbers that seemed devastating without a story behind them. There were also photos. Maya felt her stomach churn. Photos of her, outside Red's diner, visibly pregnant, looking exhausted. One particular photo that almost made her vomit, her sitting on the floor of the restaurant's parking lot after her shift, head in her hands, clearly crying. Someone had photographed this. Someone had documented her worst moments and was using it as evidence that she was inadequate. The petitioner alleges that the child's best interest is to establish primary residence with the father, who can provide a stable two-parent home. The petitioner is married, adequate financial resources, and an environment free from the instability that characterizes the mother's current life. Married. Of course, he was still married to the wife Maya had seen at the supermarket. And now he was going to use his family, the family he had lied about, to have an affair with Maya as evidence that he was a better father, as evidence that he should have custody. The document continued. Pages and pages of legal jargon that Maya could barely process through her growing panic. But the essence was clear. David wanted the baby. He wanted primary custody. And he was building a case that Maya was an unsuitable, unstable, incapable mother, and he had the resources to fight. Expensive lawyers, documentation, distorted but superficially convincing evidence. Maya clutched papers with trembling hands and tried to breathe, but she couldn't. Her chest tightened, her vision blurred at the edges. A panic attack hit hard. She stumbled to the sofa. She sat heavily. She put her head between her knees. She tried to focus on her breathing, but all she could think was, he's going to take my baby. After everything, after surviving, after almost dying, after finding Ethan, after building a life, he's going to show up and take everything. She didn't know how long she stood there. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. But eventually she heard a key in the door. Ethan, returning during his lunch break, as he always did, to check on her. Maya, his voice called from the entrance. Did you have lunch? Did you bring? He stopped when he entered the room and saw her. He saw the expression on her face. Documents scattered around her on the sofa. What happened? He crossed the room in 3 steps. He knelt in front of her, hands on her knees. Maya, what is this? She couldn't speak. She just pointed to the documents. Ethan picked them up. He started reading, and she saw his expression change, from worry to confusion to anger. Cold, controlled anger that was somehow more frightening than explosive rage. He read everything, every page, and when he finished, he carefully put the documents aside. He looked at Maya. He's not going to take this baby away from you, he said firmly. A promise. We're going to fight this, And we're going to win. How? Maya whispered, her voice broken. Look what he has. Lawyers, money, evidence. He made it seem like I am. He twisted the truth. Ethan interrupted. He took circumstances beyond his control and weaponized them. But we have real truth. You're a good mother. You fought until you literally collapsed, trying to take care of this baby. You're healthy now. Stable. You have a home. You have support. You have me. But what if that's not enough? Maya asked, pure fear in her voice. What if the judge looks at the hospitalization, the photos, the lack of family, and decides that he can provide a better life? That a stable home with 2 fathers is better than a single mother with? You're not a single mother, Ethan said, firmly. We're going to get married. Now. Before the baby is born. We're going to make it official. We're going to show that you have a family. That the baby will have 2 fathers. And we're going to fight with every resource I have. He took her hands. Maya, look at me. He won't win. I won't let him. Maya held his hands and realized that the man who had abandoned her 9 months ago now wanted to steal the baby she had carried alone through hell. And the battle she thought was over was only just beginning. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what happened in the hours and days following that envelope was a mobilization of resources, love, and determination that showed exactly what kind of man Ethan Cross was in. What kind of fight Maya was willing to wage for a baby who hadn't even been born yet, but whom she already loved more than life itself. Because facing poverty, hunger, and physical collapse was one thing. Facing a legal system designed to favor those with money and power was something completely different. And David had both. But Maya and Ethan had something more valuable: truth, and a willingness to fight to the end. Ethan wasted no time. The moment he finished reading the documents, the moment he saw terror on Maya's face, he was already making decisions. He picked up the phone. He called the office. I need leave. Family emergency. I don't know how long. I'll keep in touch. He hung up before they could question him. Then he called the best family lawyer he knew, Marcus Chen. He had worked with him on cases involving social services. He knew Marcus was brilliant, ethical, and not intimidated by adversaries with resources. Marcus, I need you. Urgent, custody case. Complicated situation, but we're on the right side. Can you come now? Marcus could. He arrived in 90 minutes. He sat at Ethan's dining table, with Maya and Ethan on one side, a stack of David's legal documents on the other, and he listened. He really listened as Maya told the whole story. About David, about lies, about the pregnancy discovered alone, about working herself to the point of collapse, about Ethan saving her, about the transformation in recent months. Marcus took notes. He asked questions. And in the end, he looked at them both and said, "This is a tough fight. I'm not going to lie. He has resources. He has expensive lawyers. And the system tends to favor stability, which in court language often means money. But you have something stronger. Clear evidence of abandonment." He found out about the pregnancy and ran away. Moved to another city. Blocked her. Zero financial support. Zero involvement. And now he wants to show up and claim custody. Judges don't like that. So we have a chance? Maya asked, her voice heavy with desperate hope. We have more than a chance, Marcus said. We have a strong case, but we need to act fast. We need to build our narrative before his narrative solidifies. And first thing, he looked at Ethan and, Maya, you said you're engaged. When do you plan to get married? After the baby is born, Ethan said. Marcus shook his head. Before, as soon as possible. Because single mother living with boyfriend sounds less stable in court than married mother in a two-father family. It's unfair, it's superficial, but it's reality. So Maya and Ethan got married. It wasn't the ceremony Maya had dreamed of as a girl. There was no white dress or church full of guests. It was a courthouse. 2 days later, with Marcus as a witness, Maya wearing a simple dress that Ethan had bought. Her 8-month pregnancy was obvious. No flowers, no music. Just words, I do, and a signature on paper that made them a legal family. And when the official said, "You may kiss," and Ethan kissed her gently, Maya cried. Not from sadness, but from relief, from gratitude, from love for a man who was willing to fight alongside her against everything. Marcus mounted a meticulous defense. He collected evidence, Dr. Santos, statements about Maya's transformation, complete medical records showing the real context of her hospitalization, not psychiatric, but a medical emergency caused by poverty. Records of all prenatal appointments since then, showing exemplary care. Ethan's statement about Maya's character, his statement about David's complete abandonment, and the best weapon of all, message records. Maya had kept everything. Her attempts to contact David, blockings, silence, irrefutable evidence of intentional abandonment. The legal battle began. Hearings, endless paperwork, court investigators visiting the house, interviewing Maya, Ethan, checking stability. And through it all, Maya carried baby, felt kicks, felt movements, and silently vowed, "I won't let him take you. You are mine. Always have been. Always will be." Baby was born 3 weeks later, in the middle of the legal process. Girl, healthy, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, perfect. Maya held her for the first time and knew with absolute certainty that she would fight to the death if necessary. They named her Hope. Hope, because that's what she represented. And 6 months later, after multiple hearings, after David presented his case and Marcus systematically dismantled every allegation, the judge decided primary custody for Maya, minimal visitation rights for David supervised at specific times, with the possibility of expansion if he demonstrated consistent involvement, which he never did. He visited Hope twice, and then stopped, because it had never been about the baby. It had been about control. About the wounded ego of a man who didn't like being abandoned, even when he had done the abandoning first. And when he realized he wasn't going to win, he lost interest. Maya won, not just custody, but life, family, a future. She, Ethan, and Hope. A family that had been built, not by blood or circumstance, but by choice, by love, by struggle. And it was more real than any traditional family could be. Because it had been tested, it had survived, it had thrived. And every day, when Maya woke up next to Ethan, when she held hope, when she lived the life she had almost lost, she remembered, sometimes, the right person appears at the right time and saves you. Not just physically, but in every way that matters. Look, if you've made it this far with me, if you've felt every part of this journey with Maya and Ethan, you know this story is about much more than romance or pregnancy or legal battles. It's about human resilience, about refusing to give up even when everything seems impossible, about finding strength in unexpected places, and about how sometimes the right people appear exactly when you need them most, not by chance, but because there are good humans in the world willing to see suffering and choose to intervene. If this kind of story resonates with you, if you want to continue following narratives about people fighting against failing systems, about love built on solid foundations, about hope emerging from despair, subscribing here is the way to continue walking with me. And I need to know, are you with Maya? Do you believe that women in impossible situations deserve help instead of judgment? That people like Ethan exist and make a real difference? Then comment below. I'm with you until the end. Let me see how many people truly understand the weight of this journey and are willing to defend those whom the system fails. If this touched you in any way, at any point you felt her despair, her hunger, her fear of losing everything, or her relief at finally being seen and protected, leave a like so I know, because stories like this need to be told. People need to understand that poverty is not a moral failing, that collapsing under impossible weight is not weakness, that fighting alone when the world abandons you is heroism, and knowing that there are people on the other side who understand this, who feel this, That makes every word worthwhile. And there's a video here that continues in the same vein. Another story of someone being unfairly judged by appearances, but whose truth is much deeper and more moving. About protection. About seeing humanity where others only see statistics. Click and follow me there. Because these journeys never truly end. There are always more stories to tell. There are always more people who need to be seen. And I want you with me for all of them.